recently addressed the Knesset committee, I think that's the one you're referring to, which was last week, on immigration absorption diaspora affairs, where you warned that the hatred of Israel was behind, quote, a new, escalating, global, sophisticated, virulent, and even lethal anti-Semitism, end quote. You said evidence of this new anti-Semitism could be found in the tendency to deny Israel's right to exist and to single it out as, quote again, the embodiment of an evil, end quote. Bad as the situation is, what is your prognosis for the future and how should it be responded to? Who should the players be and what resources should they bring to bear to deal with it?
I'm going to try to answer this question by... I'm going to try and answer this question by answering the previous question that I hadn't yet responded to, because I think the answers converge. The first thing, if you want to have an effective public diplomacy, whether it be on making the case regarding anti-Semitism, old and new and the like, if you want to have an effective public diplomacy, Dan references, you have to have a clear and coherent government policy. I can tell you, as somebody who's been a government minister, you must have a clear and coherent. If you don't have that, then you're not going to be able to engage in effective government public diplomacy. And in the nature of contemporary Israeli coalition politics, the message is neither clear nor coherent, but in fact, very often contradictory, even within the government itself. The second thing, and I've been refraining from speaking as a non-Israeli, but there's some things that I can't avoid, and I'm speaking out of my own experience. I find it difficult to see how any country can engage in an effective government public diplomacy, which is what we were talking about, if for reasons of domestic politics or what, the prime minister of that country is holding 5 ministerial portfolios, of which 2 of them happen to be the foreign ministry and communications. This is simply not a formula for an effective public diplomacy. The third thing is, and here I speak as a parliamentarian, that I have to say that I visit the Knesset often and the like, and my wife and I watch Arutz Knesset channel 99 as our bedtime entertainment. But I have to say, I've never seen such a chorus of intemperate and angry and scurrilous comments that are being made in an ongoing, you don't have to go ahead and listen to Israel's enemies. All you have to do is quote what is coming out of the Knesset by Israel's parliamentarians. And I think something needs to be done, almost a kind of code of conduct with regard to parliament. And the final thing, to take up something that Bren Jory-Yamini says, the French say, les absents sont toujours tard. If you're absent, then you can't make the case, or as Woody Allen used to say, sometimes the most important thing is just to show up. Why I'm, in terms of the debate, why I'm saying this is take the issue of Jewish refugees from Arab countries that Ben Jory-Yamini has written about and spoken about. I want to just share with you, with this I close, an experience that I had. I was speaking to a group of non-Jewish Francophone lawyers on the universal lessons of the Genocide Convention 67 years later. And I went into things such as the dangers of state sanction, incitement to hate, etc., etc. I finished my talk, a woman got up in the audience, and she said to me, Professor Collery, as you know, I'm a lawyer. I was a lawyer in the Department of Justice when you were the minister. There's something that I always wanted to ask you, and your lecture tonight gives me the opportunity to do so. In your talk about the universal lessons of the Genocide Convention, you didn't mention a word about the suffering of the Palestinians. You didn't mention a word about the Palestinian Nakba, the catastrophe suffered by the Palestinian people. Can you tell us why you did not speak at all about the suffering of the Palestinians and about the Nakba to the Palestinian people? So my answer at that point was as follows, and I shared with you. But the more important thing was then her answer after. I said to her, you're right, the Palestinians have suffered and continue to suffer. I said, you're right, the Palestinians suffered a Nakba 67 years ago. I said, but what happened 67 years ago? I said the United Nations at that time adopted what has come to be known as the Partition Resolution, recommending the partition of mandatory Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. I said the Jewish leadership at the time accepted the resolution. Palestinian and Arab leadership did not. I said, mind you, they had a right to reject the resolution if they felt it didn't comport with their interests and aspirations. I said what they didn't have a right to do was to then launch a war of aggression against the nascent Jewish state, which they spoke of, not me, as a war of extermination at the time. What they didn't have a right to do was to then launch a war of aggression against their own Jewish citizens living in Arab countries, disenfranchising them from their citizenship, dispossessing them from their rights, arresting them, detaining them, torturing them, expelling them, so that as a result of these two acts of aggression by the Arab and Palestinian leadership, we ended up with two sets of refugees, Palestinian Arab refugees and Jewish refugees from Arab countries. I said it's a tragedy to think that if the Arab and Palestinian leadership had accepted the resolution at the time, we today would be celebrating the 67th anniversary of two states for two peoples and avoided all the pain and suffering of the last 67 years. And then she got up, and this is the important point while I was saying, she said, do you mind if I say something? So I said, yes, please go ahead. She said, I have to tell you, I'm a lawyer, as I mentioned. I consider myself a well-informed person. I follow public affairs very closely. This is the first I've ever heard about Jewish refugees from Arab countries. She said, yes, I've heard about Palestinian Arab refugees. I always thought that this was the result of Jewish ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. She says, it seems to me that yes, there was a Nakba, but there was a double Nakba, both to Jews and to Palestinians. And as a lawyer, I have to go back and research and understand better who was responsible for the double Nakba. I'm telling you this story because regardless of our knowledge of Jewish refugees in Arab countries, public diplomacy by Israel was silent on this until last year when a law was finally passed authorizing making representations on these matters. And so we let a lot of time go by without the world understanding the origins and nature and truth about the Israeli-Palestinian-Arab conflict. And here, as I say, is where we can all be public diplomats with regard to this question of Jewish refugees from Arab countries and the real double Nakba and who caused it.